The handcuffs clicked shut around her wrists at 11:47 at night, under the flickering fluorescent canopy of a gas station off Interstate 81. A patrol officer's flashlight swept up across the faded eagle stitched into her jacket collar. "Stolen Valor," he said, loud enough for the three people pumping gas at the next island to turn and look. "You people think you can just throw on a jacket and play soldier." The woman didn't flinch. She didn't argue. She stood there in the cold Virginia air with her wrists pinned behind her back and a tank of gas she'd never finished pumping. And she said, very quietly, "You're going to want to call your supervisor before this goes any further." He laughed at her. What he didn't know, what he couldn't have known, standing there so sure of himself, was that the woman he'd just cuffed outranked every officer in his entire department combined. By a distance he couldn't have measured if you gave him a map and a week. Her name was Yvonne Carrington. And in about 40 minutes, Officer Brett Halloran was going to wish he had simply let her finish pumping her gas. Let's go back 4 hours, because the night didn't start at that gas station. It started on a stretch of highway 300 miles north, with a tired woman behind the wheel of a 2014 Honda Accord, with 190,000 miles on it, and a coffee cup wedged in the door pocket. Colonel Yvonne Carrington was 47 years old, and she had been driving since 2 in the afternoon. She was coming off a change of command rehearsal at one post and heading toward another, the kind of cross-country shuffle the Army hands you with a smile and a set of orders, and no real apology for the mileage. 23 years she'd been in. She'd enlisted at 18, made sergeant, gotten her degree at night, taken a commission, and climbed. Slowly, deliberately, the way you climb when nobody is reaching down to pull you up. She commanded a sustainment brigade now, close to 4,000 soldiers, a fleet of vehicles, a logistics operation that kept entire divisions fed, fueled, and moving. The kind of command that doesn't get parades but loses the war if it fails. She wasn't in dress uniform. Why would she be? She was driving her own car on her own time, wearing jeans, a gray t-shirt, and an old field jacket she'd had for years. Faded AC Us, the pattern washed nearly colorless, with her rank and her name tape still on it, because she'd grabbed it off the hook by the door without thinking. To Yvonne, it was just the warmest thing she owned. To a stranger in the dark, it was a costume. That detail matters. Hold on to it. She had $211 in her checking account until payday, because she'd just written a check to cover her nephew's community college books. The second semester in a row she'd quietly done that, and she'd skipped dinner to make the drive faster. There's a particular kind of tired that settles into a person who has given a lot and asked for almost nothing back. Yvonne wore that tired like a second jacket. The fuel light came on outside a town small enough that the gas station was the only thing still lit at that hour. She pulled in, swiped a card that she prayed would clear, and started pumping. She never noticed the patrol car idling across the lot. But the patrol car noticed her. Officer Brett Halloran had 11 years on the force, and he had a mission. Now, to understand what happened next, you have to understand that Halloran did not think of himself as a bad man. This is the part people always get wrong about stories like this. He thought of himself as one of the good ones, a protector, a patriot. He had a cousin who'd served 2 tours and come home different, and somewhere in the years after that, Halloran had attached himself to a cause, catching the fakes. The men and women who wore medals they hadn't earned, who claimed a service they'd never given. He ran a Facebook page for it. Valor Watch, 11,000 followers, a steady drip of grainy photos and triumphant captions. Caught another one. He'd built a small kingdom out of it. People in town called him a hero for it. Real veterans sometimes thanked him, and every thank you was another brick in a wall he'd built between himself and the possibility that he might one day be catastrophically wrong. Here is the thing about a man who has decided he is the law of a particular thing. He stops checking. He stops asking. The certainty does the work that evidence used to do. So when his headlights caught a black woman in a faded field jacket with what looked like an officer's eagle on the collar, pumping gas at midnight off the interstate, Halloran didn't see a colonel. He saw a post. He saw the next caught another one. He saw 11,000 people clicking the heart button. He got out of his car. "So evening," he said, and it wasn't a greeting. Yvonne looked up. Years of reading rooms, briefing rooms, war rooms, rooms full of men who'd assumed she was there to take notes, had taught her to recognize the tone instantly, the friendly word with the unfriendly weight under it. "Evening, officer." He nodded at her jacket. "That a costume? Or are you going to tell me you're in the service?" "I'm active duty." "Uh-huh." He took a step closer, flashlight coming up, sweeping the collar, the name tape, the rank. "What branch?" "Army." "What unit?" She told him. She told him the truth, calmly, the way you'd answer a customs officer. And every true word she said made him more certain she was lying, because that's what certainty does. It turns evidence into its opposite. A real soldier would have been nervous. A real soldier wouldn't be standing here so composed. In Halloran's head, her calm wasn't dignity. It was the practiced ease of a con artist. "You know it's a federal crime," he said, "to wear that, to claim that. Stolen valor. People died for what's on that collar, and you're wearing it to pump gas." "I'm aware of the law, officer. I'm also wearing it because I earned it." Two of the people at the far pump had stopped to watch. A teenager filming on his phone, almost certainly. There's always one now, and thank God for that. Because that phone is going to matter later. "Hold on to that too. I'm going to need to see some ID," Halloran said. "It's in my portfolio in the car. May I get it?" "No, you stay right there." And here's where it tipped. Yvonne, still calm, said the most reasonable sentence a person can say. "Then you're welcome to retrieve it yourself. It's a leather folder on the passenger seat. My military ID is inside." He didn't retrieve it. Stop and think about that for a second. The thing that would have ended this in 10 seconds, her ID sitting 4 feet away on a car seat, and he would not walk over and look at it. Because some part of him already knew, not consciously. But somewhere underneath the certainty, a quieter voice was whispering that if he looked in that folder, his whole kingdom might be sitting inside it. So he didn't look. He reached for her wrist instead. "You're being detained for investigation of stolen valor and providing false information to a law enforcement officer. Turn around. Now." I want you to picture it. A 47-year-old woman who has stood in front of generals, who has signed orders that sent convoys through places where the road itself could kill you, who has folded a flag into a triangle and handed it to a mother and not let her own voice break. That woman, turning around slowly at a gas station, putting her hands behind her back, and saying nothing. She didn't pull away. She didn't shout. She didn't reach for her phone or her ID or his name badge. She had spent 23 years learning that the loudest person in the room is almost never the most powerful one, and that the person with real authority can afford to be quiet, because the authority will speak for itself when the time comes. The cuffs went on, cold metal, ratcheting tight. "What you people," Halloran said, half to himself, half to the night, "think you can just buy a jacket and play soldier? You people." He'd said it twice now. The teenager's phone caught both, and Colonel Carrington, hands cuffed behind her back, jacket faded to the color of old newspaper, turned her head just slightly and said the only thing she'd say for the next several minutes. "Officer Halloran," she'd read his name tag, "I'm going to give you one chance right now to look in that folder before you put me in your car. After that, this is out of my hands and yours." He should have looked. He put his hand on her head and guided her into the back seat instead. What Halloran did next was the thing that turned a bad night into the end of his career, and he did it because he couldn't help himself. He was already composing the post in his head. He walked back to her car. Not to find her ID, he'd refused to do that. He went to photograph the jacket, evidence for Valor Watch. He opened the passenger door, and there it was. The worn leather portfolio, right where she'd said it would be. He flipped it open, looking for something incriminating. He found her common access card, the federal ID issued to every active duty service member, her photo, her rank, colonel. He found a set of official orders, government letterhead, her name, her command, a phone number for the staff duty officer at her brigade headquarters, the desk that is manned 24 hours a day, every day of the year, precisely so that someone can always answer when it matters. And this is the moment. This is the one I want to slow all the way down, because everything in this story bends around it. Halloran stood there holding a federal ID that said, in plain block letters, that the woman cuffed in the back of his car was a full colonel in the United States Army. The exact kind of soldier his entire identity was built around honoring, and for about 4 seconds, he had a choice. He could walk back to the car, take the cuffs off, and apologize. People would never have heard this story. He'd have gone home, shaken, and maybe, looked a little harder at his certainty the next time. Instead, he told himself the ID was fake. Of course he did. 11,000 followers don't let a man back down easily. He decided the card was forged. The orders were printed at a copy shop. The whole thing was the most elaborate fake he'd ever caught. He actually got more excited. This wasn't a man playing soldier. This was a master forger. The post wrote itself. He pulled out his phone and called a number. All right. Not the staff duty officer. He called dispatch to run her name and confirm his arrest. But dispatch is a recorded line. And a recorded line, plus a teenager's video, plus a refusal to check an ID sitting 4 feet away, is a paper trail that doesn't burn. The staff duty officer at Colonel Carrington's brigade headquarters that night was a captain named Reyes, and Reyes had been having the most boring shift of his life until his cell phone rang. It was a number he didn't recognize, and ordinarily he'd have let it go. But something made him answer. It was the gas station clerk, because here's what was happening on the other side of that glass, while Halloran was photographing a jacket. The teenager with the phone had walked inside, shaken, and shown the clerk the video. The clerk, a 40-year-old man named Daryl, whose own father had retired from the army after 30 years, looked at the rank on that woman's collar in the video, looked at the calm on her face, and felt something turn over in his stomach. "That's not a costume," Daryl said. "I know what that is." And then Daryl did the thing that breaks the whole story open. The orders Halloran had been waving around in the car? Daryl had seen the woman set the portfolio on her seat when she'd come in to use the restroom. An hour and a half south of nowhere wasn't where she'd come from. But the point is, she'd left a business card on the counter when she paid. An official one, with her name, her command, and that 24-hour duty desk number. Daryl had it in the cash drawer. He called it. "Sir," he told Captain Reyes, "I think one of your colonels is being arrested at my gas station, and I don't think the officer doing it believes she's real." Reyes was quiet for exactly 1 second. Then he was very, very awake. "What's her name?" "Carrington. The card says Colonel Carrington." Reyes knew exactly who Colonel Carrington was. Everyone in that brigade knew who Colonel Carrington was. And Reyes did 3 things in the next 90 seconds that Officer Brett Halloran would spend the next 2 years regretting. He confirmed she was real and on approved leave travel. He called the military police duty desk. And then he made the call that mattered most. He called the aide-de-camp to the commanding general, who, by an accident of geography that Halloran could never have anticipated, was attending a retirement event barely 20 minutes up that same interstate. The first sign that the ground had shifted under Officer Halloran came from his own radio. Dispatch came back on the recorded line, and the dispatcher's voice had changed. Unit confirm. You've got a subject in custody claiming active duty military? I've got the state police asking for your location, and I've got a call holding from a U.S. Army staff duty officer requesting a welfare check on a Colonel Carrington. Halloran felt the first cold finger of doubt. He pushed it down. Subject is detained for stolen valor. ID is fake. There was a pause on the line. Then the dispatcher carefully. Brett, they're saying the ID's real. He still didn't open the car door. Let that sit with you. Even now, he didn't go look at the woman in his back seat like a human being. He sat in the front seat and started typing his report, building his case because the alternative, that he'd cuffed a colonel for being black in a field jacket, was a thing his mind simply would not allow itself to hold. 3 minutes later, headlights swung into the lot. Then 2 more sets. Military police in a marked army vehicle, followed by a plain government sedan. And out of the sedan stepped a lieutenant colonel in uniform, the general's aide, who walked across that gas station lot with the particular unhurried stride of a person who already knows exactly how the next 5 minutes are going to go. He didn't yell. People expect yelling. There wasn't any. He walked to the patrol car, looked through the window at the woman cuffed in the back seat, came briefly to attention out of pure reflex, and then turned to Officer Halloran with an expression of almost clinical calm. Officer, he said, do you know who you have in your vehicle? A subject impersonating. That is Colonel Yvonne Carrington. She commands a sustainment brigade. I work for the general she reports to. I'd like you to remove those handcuffs now, and I'd like you to do it while my MPs and your own dispatch recording are both documenting that you were told, by the subject herself, that her credentials were in the vehicle, and that you declined to examine them. The silence that followed wasn't the dramatic kind. It was worse. It was the small, deflating silence of a man hearing the exact shape of his own mistake for the first time, and understanding that there were witnesses, and a recording, and a video, and that none of it could be deleted. Halloran opened the door. His hands were not quite steady on the cuffs. Colonel Carrington stepped out, rubbed her wrists once, and did not say a single triumphant word. The aide started to apologize and she raised one hand. Not at the aide, at all of them. I'd like everyone to take a breath, she said. Calm, level. The same voice she'd used the entire time. Captain Reyes did exactly right. The clerk did exactly right. The young man with the phone did exactly right. She turned to Halloran, and for the first time there was something in her face that wasn't just composure. There was a kind of tired sadness. Officer, I told you to look in the folder, twice. You didn't look. I want you to understand why I'm not yelling at you. It's because I don't have to. Everything that's about to happen to you, you did to yourself the moment you decided you already knew the answer. Then she asked the MPS for the teenager's name so she could thank him properly. And she went to shake Daryl's hand through the gas station door. That was it. That was the whole reveal. No screaming, no gloating, no crowd erupting into applause. Just a colonel who'd been right the entire time, declining to make herself bigger by making the small man smaller. The smallness was already his. The downfall didn't happen all at once. Real ones never do. They come in stages, the way a building doesn't fall the instant the support is cut. It groans, it leans, and then it goes. The first stage was the video. The teenager posted it that night. By morning, it had a few thousand views. By the end of the week, several million. Cop cuffs black woman for stolen valor. She was an active duty Army colonel. The internet did what the internet does, but this time the facts underneath it were solid as a runway. The dispatch recording came out under a public records request. So did Halloran's body camera footage. The part where he says, "You people," twice, clear as a bell, and then someone found Valor watch. That was the second stage, and it was the cruelest irony of all. Halloran's own Facebook page, 11,000 followers, years of caught another one posts, became the single best piece of evidence against him. It established a documented pattern. It proved he hadn't made a one-time mistake. He'd built an entire practice out of deciding people were liars and acting on it without checking. The page he'd built to expose fakes became the proof that he'd falsely accused a real one. The thing he was proudest of was the thing that buried him. The third stage was institutional. Internal Affairs opened a case. The state police filed a use of force review. And the chief who had spent years protecting Halloran, burying the earlier complaints, calling him an asset, discovered very quickly that there's a difference between protecting a man from a local grievance and protecting him from a viral video of him cuffing a U.S. Army colonel while saying "you people." The chief tried to issue a measured statement. The town council was not in a measured mood. Within a month, the chief announced an early retirement that fooled no one. The fourth stage was legal. Colonel Carrington filed a civil suit, false arrest, civil rights violations. And because Halloran had refused to examine identification that was offered to him, refused it twice, on a recorded line, the usual shields didn't hold. His own union, after reviewing the footage, declined to expend its political capital defending the indefensible. He was terminated. His certification to serve as a law enforcement officer anywhere in the state was revoked. He would not be putting on that uniform, the one he was so quick to accuse her of faking, ever again. The valor he claimed to defend, he no longer had any standing to speak for. The man who hunted imposters had, in the end, impersonated something himself, a fair and careful officer of the law. And he got caught. Here's the part that surprised everyone, including the lawyers. When the settlement came through, and it was substantial, the kind of number that ends in a lot of zeros, Colonel Carrington didn't keep it. She set up a fund, a scholarship, specifically for the children of enlisted soldiers, the privates and specialists and sergeants, the ones at the bottom of the pay scale who get the least and give plenty. She named it after no one. She didn't put her own name on it. She'd spent her whole career watching young soldiers skip meals to send money home, the same way she'd skipped her own dinner that night to cover her nephew's textbooks, and she knew exactly where the money would do the most good. It didn't happen overnight. These things never do. The fund took most of a year to set up properly, with the lawyers and the paperwork and the tax structure, and the first scholarships didn't go out until the following fall. Vindication isn't a lightning bolt. It's slower and quieter than that. But the first year, 11 students started college on that money. 11, the same number, by sheer coincidence, as the thousand-fold followers Halloran had once been so proud of. Carrington noticed the number and never mentioned it to anyone. She got her command, eventually, a bigger one. At her change of command ceremony, the general she reported to, the one whose aide had walked across that gas station lot, mentioned the gas station only once, briefly, in his remarks. He said that he'd learned more about Colonel Carrington's character from how she behaved in handcuffs than from any evaluation report he'd ever read. that she had been wronged in the most public way a person can be wronged, and had answered it by sending other people's children to college. She stood at attention while he said it. She did not cry. But the soldier holding the brigade colors that day, an enlisted kid whose own little sister was one of the 11, said later that he watched the colonel's jaw tighten just once, for about a second, and then steady again. Darrell, the gas station clerk, got an invitation to that ceremony. He drove 300 miles to attend, in his good suit, and he stood in the back. And afterward, the colonel found him in the crowd and shook his hand a second time. The teenager with the phone got a handwritten letter and a challenge coin she pressed into his palm. The kind of coin you don't buy, the kind you can only be given, and the faded field jacket, the one that started all of it. The one a man had been so sure was a costume. She kept wearing it, on her own time, in her own car, on long drives between posts, because it was warm, and because it was hers, and because she had earned every washed-out thread of it, and because a person who knows exactly who she is doesn't need to dress up to prove it to anyone, not to a stranger at a gas station, and not to the part of the world that decides, before it ever looks in the folder, that it already knows the answer.